Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sally Fletcher. I'm the Head of Thought Leadership and Community here at Hypatus, and I've got two absolutely fantastic co-speakers here with me who I'll introduce very shortly. For those of you that have turned up and joined us today, we're going to be talking about designing the Agentic GBS and its impact on workforce transformation. So I ran lots and lots of webinars last year, and so often the conversation talked about the technology around agentic AI. We already know the technology is fantastic. We know it can do lots and lots of things. But what about the workforce? What about the people and the impact? We're going to talk to you a bit about that today, about the repercussions as my expert speakers see them. Also a little bit about how to get there, give you a bit of a roadmap, and keep it as practical as possible. What I'd like to say, a few housekeeping notices before we get going, is that there is a Q&A and a chat in your panel on the right-hand side. So please do post your questions in there. My speakers here are very friendly and they were very happy to answer your questions. So don't be backwards about coming forwards. There's also a couple of polls I'm going to run throughout the session. I'll launch one now for you guys, if I can work out how to do it. Here we go. What's your biggest concern about the human impact of agentic AI? Is it job displacement, reduced need for certain roles, pressure to constantly upskill and keep pace with change, erosion of leadership pipelines and career progression paths, or loss of human judgment and over-reliance on automated decisions, or something else? And if it is something else, post it in the chat. I'd love to know what you guys are tasked with and what's keeping you up at night. I'm going to leave that up for a minute while I introduce my speakers for today. So first up, we have Chas Moore. Chas, give everyone a wave. Yeah, that's him. Chas is the executive partner for transformation at Chasey Partners, who are a GBS expert in the industry. As I said, Chas is currently executive partner and he holds global responsibility for operations transformation projects, ensuring quality assurance and providing technical expertise. He's joined by Uli Erxleben, founder and CEO for Hypatus. Hypatus is a company based in Berlin and New York that specializes in developing agentic AI specifically for GBS, as well as machine learning software for document processing automation. Uli has a fantastic background at both McKinsey and Company in Berlin and Palo Alto, and was previously managing director for Rocket Internet SE and ProSiebenSat. If you guys are in Germany, you might know that name as well. So let's have a look at our results. Okay, brilliant. So loss of human judgment and over-reliance on automated decisions is facing some and basically everything. People are worried about everything. And let's have a look at the chat also. Yes, okay, brilliant. So keep them coming, guys. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my slides and just talk us quickly through the agenda for the next 45 minutes or so. And then I'll hand over to Chas and to Uli. Okay, so let me know, Uli, that you can see my screen. Perfect, okay. Great, so we're going to kind of look to tackle 4 different aspects. Clearly, impact, what it's all about, different perspectives, reality checks, business case strategies, the role of HR and people development. We're again going to look at a really clear and practical readiness assessment. How can you decide whether you're ready for agentic AI, and how can you get there? A roadmap, so give you a little bit of different approaches, methodology, case study. Uli's going to show you in practice how it actually looks when you are working with an agent. So if you've been curious about what is the reality of my day-to-day working with agents, we're going to show you that, and then we've got some time for questions at the end. So Uli, I'm going to hand over to you first to introduce us to the core topic of the webinar. Tell us a little bit about your vision here.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. So let me start with this vision of the future, as you, I think, should do with every strategic discussion. So the way that I see this right now with this fundamental agentic transformation that all businesses will have to deal in this in the next decade, especially for business support, for GBS, for shared services. I think the perspective for me is pretty clear. In 5 years' time, 90% of this human business support work that organizations do today in their business support process is going to be taken over by AI agents. So for me, this is a fact. And now there is a lot of questions about this, right? I mean, if you buy into this or not buy into this, I think no one will deny that agentic AI is going to have a tremendous impact. Whether it's 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, time will tell, but it is going to happen. And there is profound impact on organizations and on people that comes with this transition. And now is the time to start thinking that through and think that through from that end, right? In 5 years' time, 90% will be done by agents. So what do you need to do and think about today in order to manage this transition successfully? And today, of course, we are going to look into this essential topic of what that means for people in your organization.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really interested to hear more. So, Chaz, I'm going to come to you next because we're going to talk about the human impact of all of this. There's naturally an enormous amount of discussion and predictions that we see about the impact of AI, not just on GBS, but on business as a whole. Tell us a little bit about what you've been hearing there.
It's interesting. When I've gone to events this spring, the conversation I'm hearing about the human impact is a lot of upskilling. And that's what I hear about. And it feels like there's a lot of denial or enthusiasm about the agentic AI. We don't want that human side. Oh, we're going to upskill everybody. There's a lot of human impact sheltering behind that word upskilling. So we want to talk a little bit about the reality. Here's some information from common research. It's in media. I'm sure you've seen a lot of this. The first one was interesting. We talked a lot about the workforce. The first one's about the CEOs themselves. 50% of them believe that their own job stability is tied directly to the success of their AI strategy this year. Not in 5 years, not in 3 years, this year. So that is pressure that the CEOs are feeling. The other one, next one, 77% of CEOs believe the Gen AI hype has been overhyped, but that the potential is underhyped. And I think we're very much on the cusp. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the reality of where we are today. The next part, CEOs are looking at how do they convert these massive investments into AI into productivity. And this is the fourth month, a bit of a contrary result. 2 to 3 times increase in entry-level hiring. What we're finding is this is a statistic from IBM. They're increasing their entry-level hires by 3 times. And the reason is their seasoned employees, their experienced employees aren't disrupting themselves fast enough, and they're not digital native. So they're bringing the digital natives in. So there's disruption, but we're not hiring, there's a shift. And so that's interesting to see. Now, the CEO of Anthropic wrote a blog posting, and he's expecting 10 to 20% unemployment spike. So not the 4 or 5% that we're used to in our traditional economy, 10 to 20%. Now, that article was actually, if you read the whole article, was quite constructive. It talked about policy decisions in government. So I think it's a bit intentionally inflammatory to get people thinking. But if we don't take control of this, we don't do things intentionally, there's definitely going to be an impact. If you take a look at the worker perspective, we're hearing a lot about AI will free you from drudgery, but it's actually quite difficult if you're monitoring. You don't have the ebb and flow, you're always on. And so you can actually see that really does change the natural flow of your work. You start to think about, learning new skills, but then you're not learning how are you going to learn those foundational skills that allow you to become that manager or supervisor, and that is being missed out. You're going to be more productive. That's a common one. You're going to get more done. Well, the reality is for a lot of organizations, they're expecting their people to get more done, It doesn't mean that they're freeing up time to have big ideas. You're going to be focusing on strategy. Guess what? You're missing the part of the job that you actually enjoy. And also you hear agents are your partners, and there's the fear that the agent is actually interviewing for my job, or that I'm training the agent to replace me. The last quote was interesting. ServiceNow did a survey of generation AI survey, and they asked the participants what their biggest fear was. And it wasn't job loss, it wasn't environmental degradation, it wasn't machine bias. They were worried that AI was making them stupid, which is interesting. I would have, before I read the article, thought it was all about job losses. And so there's definitely different poles in the system.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, Chaz. Like, I mean, I've never heard anyone say that AI is overhyped, it's underhyped. But yeah, I think it's there's so much to look at, and so many articles on the internet that even AI wrote, that you have to sort the wheat from the chaff.
Sally, maybe let me make a remark here,
Yeah.
because Jess, it's not on the slide, but you said that, and I think you made a great point there. So in the projects that we are doing, by bringing those AI agent systems to work at organizations, there is a lot of workload that goes into that implementation that is done by the team. And a lot of that work is actually work by those practitioners, those experts, teaching the AI how to do their job, right? And I find that a quite interesting perspective from the field, where you have a tremendous increase of work that goes beyond what you do every day, that you now need to also invest in actually bringing your AI agents up to speed, basically teaching them to then take over your job. And I find that a pretty interesting dynamic that you have in those projects, right? Lots of work, but to the end of teaching the agent to do what you are doing today. I think that feels very weird often for those workers.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the last couple of slides, Chaz, have created a relatively bleak picture, but I would love to kind of look at, I suppose, is it all doom and gloom? Do you feel like there's some scaremongering? Is there good news? Take us a little bit through. I mean, I think both of you will speak to this, but let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, maybe Chaz, I'll start with you and then move to Uli.
A lot of, we used to have greenwashing, right, for environmental. Now you have AI washing. There are a lot of announcements about headcount reduction. Those companies making those massive reductions, they are addressing the economic downturn. A lot of it was overhiring during the pandemic that they're now adjusting for. And they're putting it under the umbrella of AI so that it looks strategic, it looks proactive. Another example of the AI wash, I was reading an article around education. I was curious about higher ed, how's that changing? And it followed a couple of students. One student was in business, went into marketing, left the marketing job because they figured their job was going to be automated, and became a stand-up comedian. Another one was in education, was worried about AI, and then dropped out and became a musician. And their excuse was AI. And I thought about it. I said, people have been changing their career path for a long time, and they don't want to disappoint mom and dad. And it's no, it's not, I have to become a musician because it's creative. It's AI's fault. And I thought about it, shouldn't the journalists be a little bit more introspective and thinking about that? But then I realized journalists are paid on clicks. And if it was an article on same old education shift, I wouldn't have read it. It was an AI labeled article, so I clicked on it and read it. So there is a preponderance of putting tags and content on AI because people are reading it. It's a little bit clickbaity. Now that doesn't speak that it doesn't exist, but we need to be skeptical when we read something about, are people putting on AI washing to either protect it or to give them some air cover. There's a couple of other points on here to go through the hype here. Organizations are accelerating entry level hires. They want to get those digital natives. They want to get people who are really natural using AI in their workflow into the organization. Plus, you need those seasoned employees to make sure that the business context knowledge is embedded in those systems that you're designing. The AI implementation is going to create work. So there's more work to be done. It's also going to free up investment spending. And now this is not just AI, but a lot of investment spending is going to happen that's not AI. I remember with when we had year 2000, those of us that are old enough in business and were worried about all the digital network collapsing. I was in a hospital CFO at the time. Government opened up a program. We got to upgrade all of our computers because they weren't year 2000 ready. And we had beautiful new networks. We got a new MRI machine because the old, we needed an MRI, but now it would be ready. So there's a lot that's going to be riding on the coattails of this AI and deal with those transformation initiatives that we wanted to get done, but there was no money for it. And then finally, company is more than tasks and systems. And the proactive organizations will realize that and invest in their people to prevent the hauling out of systems. Now, that said, going back to the subheading here, there is going to be a significant impact. But there is a path forward between that denial that nothing's going to happen and Armageddon that we're going to get to 20% unemployment. There's a path forward, and we've been helping our clients find that.
Just let me make two comments on the seasoned employees are needed and AI implementation creates work buckets here. So what I can say from the field is those seasoned experts that know every little thing inside out, they are absolutely crucial to get the AI transformation to be successful. And there is, in every organization, there is lots of non-codified knowledge that sits in those seasoned experts' heads and that they apply every day and that they input into the process in their conversations with their colleagues. And also a lot of those experts, they're going to retire eventually. And I see a lot of pressure also in organizations to make sure that before those people leave, that this knowledge somehow needs to be codified and put to work. And a lot of the work, and this is now where the AI implementation creates work, is required, is so what you need to do is you need to sit down and really on a global level define your processes so that they are clear and that there's clear ownership of them and that's absolutely sort of controllable and manageable how those AI agents are going to work, because that needs to be defined. That's your job that you do this. And this knowledge needs to be then codified, feedback needs to be provided to agents, work instructions need to be designed. This is a tremendous effort that you need to do as an organization. It creates a ton of work and it's requiring those seasoned experts to provide that knowledge and that context so that you can get that done. And then, of course, you need to have the right talent, the upskilled talent that actually knows how to put those information into the work instructions of an AI agent and how to provide feedback and work with all those tooling. By the way, I'm going to show this to you in a bit that you get a bit of a better understanding what I mean by those words. And this is what you see in every transformation project that we are doing, that this is tremendous work and relies so much on the seasoned employees that you have in your organization. And maybe just as a final statement, also to be very clear here, what is happening now and over the next years is a big organizational effort, and it's a big transformation that is going to happen. And it's going to have profound impact on how you are going to organize and how work is going to look like. So that is definitely going to happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to move us forward to the next area. And when I see kind of business cases being built, they're still mainly built on productivity gains, cost savings, aspects like this. But I mean, how do you build an AI business case and minimize the human impact? Chaz, I'd love to get your perspective on this.
Organizations in private, public, government, higher education, especially with government and higher education, there's often a implicit, if not explicit, community investment mandate. They often, I remember one business case we did for a university, they were surprised at the saving. And what we ended up doing was building in turnover rates and others so they could actually soften that. They didn't want to show the productivity because it would be against their mandate. It would just not go against their culture, would go against their culture. So we've been at JZ Partners understanding what business objectives are and understanding what are some other opportunities. Now, the first one, non-wage saving. Now, this one's very interesting with Agentic because this is always talked about, but not necessarily real. With Agentic, you can actually achieve things like improving working capital, especially in O2C. There's amazing things happening with collections and automation of that can actually truly improve your realization of cash in your sales cycle. But there's other areas, managing licenses. You don't need to get away from the generalist model. You have the non-wage savings. Those are things that you can put into there that's not people denominated. Natural attrition. We've been talking about the demographic shift. A few years ago, the conferences were all talking about when all the baby boomers retire. Now, there was a downturn, so the baby boomers didn't necessarily retire, but certainly that is coming. And so having that natural attrition, that's a common thing we do in our business cases, is leading, because you also save on severance, but it's also less disruptive for the organization. The talent investment is going to be a big, so while you make the shift, we were talking about that transformation, you need a project team to oversee and build these systems. Growth. If you have a proper agentic GBS, you can truly be scalable. Scalable used to mean that you add capacity less than you did in the past because people are adding efficiently. It's not one for one, but you're still adding. With agentic, it's truly scalable. That same team can do more without more. And so that's going to be a different definition. And then, of course, transfers, looking at other departments, continuous improvement, and then there may be supporting transition. We've been supporting organizations for 20 years with shared services and automation and the impact of the people, and that absolutely can be respected. There's some organizations that are in more of a spot where they need to achieve very strict productivity saving. We can help you with that. But then others who are looking to maintain their culture and ease into that shift in a very respectful way, even when there's reduction of headcount, there's a very respectful, people forward way of doing that. People feel honored and their contributions feel honored, even if they're not part of that future state.
Yeah, just maybe also to chime in here. I like the scalability point that you have here from a GBS perspective. So there's a lot of discussions that I've been in where those GBS organizations are also planning now to take on more work, right? To take more BUs on and service them because now they can. They could not before, even if they wanted, right? I mean, building up that talent, building the organization out, it's always easier said than done, right? You need to get the talent in, you need to train it. It takes a while, it's hard. You would not even find people. But now with those possibilities that make you so much more scalable, I also have heard a lot of GBS organizations even consider to take on external clients now, right? Because they have that done, they can do it super efficiently, and they really want to build this out as a business further. And I think that's really a big part from a GBS perspective, of course, where you can grow.
Yeah, also to build off that, this is a real opportunity for companies that make the shift successfully, especially medium and smaller organizations, because there's a lot of large outsourcing organizations, for example, that have that capital, that infrastructure. That's harder for them to shift. So the organization to move in a more agile way can really start to open up opportunities for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just move us on to the next slide here, because we've talked about the human impact, but we want to look at the readiness and how can the people on our webinar today actually get to Agentic GBS, this vision that Uli presented at the beginning with the 90% agentified. So I'd love to kind of come to you, Chaz, first, and you've got this fantastic readiness assessment. Talk us through it.
Excellent. So at JZ Partners, we took a look at the 12 parameters. We've always, for the past 20 years, talked about the 4 critical success factors. We've looked at this from the perspective of the AI. And so, for example, if you look at data foundation, is your data unstructured, distributed, has quality issues? that means you're less ready for AI. Or is it centralized, clear ownership, high quality, higher readiness? And so for each of these 12 minutes, we look at technology, the readiness of your leadership, your people, your governance, your processes, and also your clients. What are your clients expecting? Do you have standardized service level? Because one of the things that as you move to AI, there is a tendency to look in the past with rose-colored glasses. It's very important to have an understanding where your services are today so that you can meet them or beat them in the future and start to address that natural tendency to look back more positively in the past. And one of the key things is relying on who you know, or do you have client journeys that are mapped? So if you take a look at our next slide, what JD's done, we developed this online form. And what we'll do is we'll send a link after the webinar so you can complete this yourself. It's anonymous. What you can do is rate on that 5-star scale. Where are you against the 12 parameters? And if you want, if you leave your email address, what we'll do is we'll return your submission with you with a comparison to the database and also some commentary on AI readiness and how you can address some of those gaps. So that is a online form that we'd be happy for people to do that, and we'll send a link after the webinar for that.
Yeah, and just maybe also just quick remark from me here. So this is brilliant, right? I mean, this is exactly what it is. So if you would ask me what I always find most impactful, and of course you need to have everything in place, right? It's all important. But what I always tell clients where they need to put especially attention to is the documentation and standardization on a global scale of their processes. They need to come clean how things should be done. That is very important. And in order to make that happen, you need to have the leadership buy-in to also make certain decisions there. And of course, then also the skills and capacity of people to actually execute on it, right? So this defining processes with full leadership backing to make decisions on how you should be running certain things. This is so important, and I see many organizations fail to do so.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so good to have a practical view of how to get started and how to assess where you need to go, because it's such an overwhelming topic for most of us. Uli, I'd also like to kind of ask you a couple of questions. We've talked about readiness. If people aren't ready, what are some of the areas that you feel like they should focus on when they're looking to get to agentic-led GBS? We mentioned, I know that use case selection is one that you're very passionate about. Maybe you can talk us through that a little while.
Yeah, of course. Maybe we start with the use case selection, and then I talk a bit about governance, compliance, and processes and such, and also how to get started. So from my point of view, there is a mistake that I see over and over again when organizations start the transformation. There is a tendency to go for very hard, very specific, and very small use cases to try out agentic AI. And it's understandable, right? I mean, you want to understand the capabilities of the AI, you want to understand the process a bit, and you want to solve very hard problems. It's clear. But I think it's stupid because in any case, you need to make a significant investment to make such an initiative successful. And if you need to make that investment, go for the use cases where you can create the biggest success first. And the biggest success comes always with a use case where most labor, most effort goes into today. And those use cases also happen to be the ones that are most ready for agentic transformation because it's the ones that are best documented, where you have the clearest processes and the highest level of standardization, right? You should be starting with those because they set you up for success and you can drive real business impact. So you can create a success story. And those early success stories are very important because if you get it right, and getting it right doesn't mean that you have a nice little showcase that you can show around. Success is that you create real business impact. This you would achieve with those big ones, right? Accounts payable invoice automation, sales order automation, right? Those really big ones that you have in your organization. make them a success, drive business impact, and then you will have all the freedom to continue with your transformation journey because you have proven that you can deliver business value. I find that so important, everyone gets it wrong. Anyways, so let's talk a bit about the governance and compliance aspect.
And actually, before you leave away from use cases, I think it's also useful to define what we mean by use case. Because I was talking to a client yesterday, and they were bringing AI into the organization, and they're talking about the initiatives, investment they were doing. And I asked them, so how are the outcomes? What's the plan here? And the response was, well, we're going to see what adoption is, and then we're going to do the use case, see what the use cases are afterward. That's not a use case. That is not a strategy. AI is not about adoption. You need to be focusing on outcomes. So a use case is, you know what your scope is. You know what your baseline is. You have a very intentional shift in metrics that you're measuring, so you know whether or not it's a success. You see organizations that are using the number of tokens that individuals use as a measure of productivity. That is not a measure of productivity. You have people that are just churning with token use just so they look productive, they look innovative. You need to be thinking about outcomes when you think about that. It's not about adoption, it's about outcomes, and that's what the use case is, and we're helping organizations do that. So then Uli can talk about.
Yeah, and it's here's a hot take, guys. It's also not about delivering automation rates, because this is also not outcome. That's just a KPI. What's outcome, what's business impact, is actually what you're going to save, what you're going to sell more. And there is a trap there, because there's the tendency in automation project to have a very narrowly defined automation KPI that you show around and say this has been successful. But who cares, right? What matters is, what is the actual savings you're realizing? What is the additional revenue that you're making here? So it's the business impact, it's the actual business outcome that you need to go for. It's the automation rate trap that I also see so often.
To the AI washing that we were talking about before. If you look at those companies that are doing those big layoffs, their margins are not improving and their productivity is not improving. Those are that you expect that. That's what an outcome is when you're doing a proper use case. That's doing a bit of a callback to the AI washing. Take a look at their margin and productivity of the people, and that will tell you whether or not it's actually an agentic transformation.
Yeah. Is there any other thing you wanted to speak to this slide, Uli? Otherwise, we'll move to the demo.
Yeah, because there's 2 more points I want to make. I'll hurry up. I know I'm a bit too slow on that slide here. So, guys, I've mentioned this a couple of times, right? Governance, compliance. So there is a lot of work that needs to go into defining and documenting global processes and establishing clear process ownership. The big day of the global process owner is coming with agentic transformation. This is where those people are actually needed, right? They need to define processes, make decisions, they need to standardize, they need to get the organization ready to have work take over by agents. And then the other very important point here, I was going to mention this, those systems need to be explainable and they need to be auditable. It's very important, right? And there's very specific mechanisms that you need to think about to not have a black box there. Everything needs to be explainable. And that's a very important aspect. I'm going to show you a little bit when I give the demo what that actually means, right? And maybe how to start, and then I'm done. Yeah, build or buy, right? There's use cases where you should be building. There's use cases where you should be buying. The use cases where you should be buying is high volume, multi-step, mission critical, compliance heavy, end-to-end automation processes. Guys, do not build that stuff on your own. It's hard and it's difficult to maintain. That stuff you should buy. And then there's things that are very specific to your business that you can easily build for yourself, as long as it's not so compliance heavy and mission critical and does need to run all the time. And the POC pilot, also very briefly, you need to do both. Obviously, POCs can be done super quickly. Just understand what a large language model can do for you, and then go try it out in real life. That's a pilot. That's the differentiation. Try out what the large language model can achieve, and then bring this into actual work and see how it works actually in your processes, in your systems, and see what outcome it can produce for you in real life. So this is how you need to think about it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and let you share, Uli, and show us a little bit about how it actually works in practice. Because
Sally, can you show that one slide that you have there first so that I can explain a little bit what you're going to see? Otherwise, I'm going to lose you, I think.
I can. Yeah. Okay. This one.
Yeah. Guys, what you see here is a AI agent team. So when you speak about agentic transformation, what is actually meant is that you have teams of AI agents, not an AI agent, teams of AI agents carry out big business processes end to end. And those big business processes fall into a lot of different distinct tasks, starting with input management, where you need to read emails from your business partners, understand what they want, what documents they sent you, what this is all about, then getting information out, matching it to your master data, doing accounting, doing taxation, whatever needs to be done, right? But it's many different things that need to be done in sequence. And this is handled not by one agent, but by a team of agents that work together and work through those complications. And the way that those agents, the individual ones in that process work, is they need to have a clear work instruction, how they should be carrying out their job, right? The work instruction, it's a prompt, it's called prompt engineering. They need to be written. That's those process documentations that we spoke about earlier that are very important. And then there's another thing they need. They need to have knowledge how to do something, how to make a decision. And guys, this knowledge that cannot come from somewhere in the internet. It cannot come from what a large language model has learned when it was trained. It's knowledge that needs to come from you, from your organization. It's specific. You need to govern that data. That is called context engineering. So you have work instructions that need to be detailed out, and you need to curate the necessary knowledge for the AI to make decisions. So keep that piece in mind. And now I'm going to show you how you work with agents. And I hope that it's going to make it a bit clearer how work with agents is going to look then. Okay, so let me share this and explain. So here we go. I hope you all can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, guys, it's a bit of a deep cut. Please stay with me, right? I think it's a quite interesting insight that I'm going to give you now. Okay, so what you see here is a invoice, right? No surprises. So we are looking at an AI agent team that handles accounts payable invoices, right? This typical use case that we have there. So what you see here is an invoice, and on the right-hand side, you see AI agent-generated outputs that are going to then later on do certain things in your ERP system, right? This is not for users here. This is just for us to see what the AI has done. So AI has been creating quite a few outputs here. We will be looking at those in a little bit, but there's a different view, right? Because this is just the outcome. That's the produced data. But the data is produced in an agentic workflow. Agentic workflow because there is many different agents that take care of different things in that process, right? You would have an agent that does information extraction. You would have an agent that does master data matching. You would have an agent that does down here somewhere accounting, PO matching, all those things that need to be done in accounts payable processing. And they work together. So you can always look into their conversation where you would see the specific work instructions. That's here, roles and responsibilities, inputs they should be using, and then the data that they need to extract. I'm just clicking here on the information invoice extraction agent, right? Souped up OCR, right? It's the simplest agent that you can think of. So very detailed work instructions. And then the agent would explain for every decision it makes why it made that decision. This is why I took that reference number. This is why I took that date. This is why I normalized this currency the way I have normalized it and so on, right? There's all the explanations here. So this is called a conversation. It's quite important. So you can look into the work instructions, into the outputs, and into the explanations, right? Important thing. So now, how do you work with those systems? So, right, here's some reasoning why it decides that this is a non-PO invoice in the specific case here. It extracts line item information, but that's not so interesting. What it actually does is it provides you with a posting line for that specific invoice, right? So it summarizes the different services that are provided here, that it would be assigning the GL accounts, right? It splits those different items here into two posting lines. It assigns cost centers, explains its decisions, right? That's the reasoning, why it shows custom duties here and freight documentation fees and what have you. So it always explains its decisions. But see, where it has been struggling is it could not determine the tax code for that specific event, right? It's a very specific one, right? Because this is import tax and duties here, and it couldn't do this, right? It didn't find the right DL accounts. So what I now need to do as an expert is I need to provide feedback to the agent how the agent needs to do those type of things. So the way that this works is that you engage in a conversation with the agent. And I've done that earlier, not to waste too much time on the demo. So just before the meeting. So I said that I have feedback here. Tax coding for this invoice and import tax and duties, they need to be coded to T1. That's the tax code here for the specific company code, right? So I gave that feedback to the agent. And then the agent has been answering, said, okay, thanks, I can save that feedback. But here's a couple of clarification questions. So you mean this is just for company code 5130, just for this one to what that invoice has been addressed to? And if I understand correctly, in those cases, with those type of item descriptions, I should pay always TO, not VO or something else, but TO. Can you please confirm this? So what I would be doing now is, I would say, no, listen, please apply this for all German company codes and save the feedback. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to send it, and then the agent is going to think about it. And right, once it's done, it's going to say, okay, I've been including that specific feedback on how to account for import tax and duties into my knowledge base. And I'm going to apply that knowledge now to all related business events that happen in German company codes, right? So it's adding now the feedback here, and then it's going to tell me that it did that successfully a little bit. It's going to take a little while. Apologies for this. But this type of feedback is important. So I'm teaching now. Done, right? I've saved this. Here's what I've learned. This is how I put it into my knowledge base, and I'm ready now to apply this for the next transactions that I have here. So this type of giving feedback, teaching the AI how to do specific things that it cannot yet do based on the work instructions that I have been providing, this is how you work with those systems, right? And before, I'm a bit over time, that always happens when I do those demos. Apologies. So let me show you another thing, right? I'm jumping here now into the prompt management of a accounting agent, just that you see how that works, right? Because I've been speaking about work instructions. So what you see here is the work instruction for the account coding agent, right? It uses a large language model here. There's versioning of all those prompts that I'm doing. And then it has a work instruction where in a lot of detail, the roles and responsibilities are assigned, necessary inputs that the AI should be using, and then every single step on how to build a posting line, right? This is all described here. And then you can provide specific feedback and instructions for specific accounts, how they should be used, right? So this is those work instructions that need to be defined, and then the AI is going to do it exactly like this, but it needs to be codified, right? And then there's always those special cases where the AI cannot make a decision based on its work instructions. And for those, you need to give on-the-job feedback in a conversation with your AI agent. And the AI agent is going to put that feedback into its knowledge base and can always retrieve it and then apply it to those business cases. So you teach by giving feedback. Very important concept. And this is how you need to work with those systems. That's the future.
It's very interesting to see this real example because it demystifies it. When we talk about oversight of agents, it's natural language, it's in a chat interface. You're not, it used to be when you had, say, training an OCR and you had a new vendor to change where their PO code was. You'd have to technically know how to go in there, circle the part of the invoice, and train very individually. This is very much you're training an artificial intelligence that acts like a junior person that you're working side by side. And that's the mindset, but also demystifies it for those seasoned employees. You don't have to be a technical AI expert to do this. That the whole part of this is you're mentoring the AI as part of your team, and that is what you need to bring in. We're not looking for software engineers. That's going to help people feel more.
You need to know how to do it, and you need to be able to explain this clearly. If you can do this, then you are going to be successfully in educating and implementing an AI agent. And this is not an IT task. This is a business task, right? This is where the seasoned experts need to chime in and educate those AI co-workers there.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's always makes it less intimidating when you see it like that, that how you can actually work with it without being a, software coder or whatever. It's really, really cool to see. Now we've got about 12 minutes left of our webinar. I'm going to launch our second poll. I'm going to hand over to you, Chaz. I know you're going to take us through a little bit of that phase rollout and give us a few tips on basically how to get started. And our audience, if you do have questions, pop them in the chat. If we don't have time for all the questions, I will download them, share them with our speakers, and we will respond to you by email. So, do put those in the chat, and we will make sure that you do get an answer. So yeah, Chaz, over to you. Tell us a little bit about how you see the rollout and how people actually get going with these solutions.
So when you're doing a transformation or any project, there's a couple of points I want to highlight on this slide. One, you need to think about the 4 critical success factors that we talked about before. Secondly, you start with an assessment. You want to be careful. I remember when I was studying for exams, you just don't start writing like mad. You plan out your question, then you understand it when you have a complex question. Same thing, 5 phases here. You have the assessment, design, build, deploy, and then stabilize. Your assessment is your plan, your mandate for the transformation, design as much on paper before you change anything. Build, you do as much as possible before you go live. Deploy, you're going live. Stabilize, you ensure you achieved your outcomes that you expected and lessons learned. So that's the key piece. If you hit the next slide, when taking this from the perspective of AI and agentic AI, there's a couple of different routes that you can take when you do this. On the left-hand side, it's the less complex. It's simpler, and it gets to a more transformational, broader perspective. So an AI process suitability assessment, this is where your AI readiness and maturity, you have decent systems. You're very clear on what you want to do, and you essentially want to bolt on a few AI solutions. You can do the suitability assessment and move very quickly, 6 to 8 weeks, understand what you're going to do, develop those use cases with appropriate outcome, and move forward. The AI strategy and readiness assessment is where you still want to move quickly, but you're not quite sure if you're ready for AI. And so we do that formal assessment of those 12 parameters. We provide a mitigation plan. We filter the use cases by your readiness. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about how do you deal with those gaps in your readiness. And part of it is selecting scope and maybe narrowing the scope for where your data is better in those other areas. And then last one, the transformation roadmap. So this is a transformation that includes AI, but looked at the fundamental. Maybe the solution is RPA. You don't want you want something more deterministic rather than probabilistic in terms of a integration or a solution. And so RPA is still very effective, or you just need to get in proper process ownership, create some standardization, clarifications of role, which will enable the AI. So that's a broader transformation. So a couple of different routes, and obviously whenever we talk to a client, we adjust this. It kind of gives a spectrum, and then we adjust this for what the individual needs.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Chaz. And Uli as well. It was great to see it in action. And we've got maybe five minutes or so for questions. So yeah, if you want to submit your questions in the Q&A or in the chat, we could take a few of those. Now, the first question I wanted to go to comes from Dominic, and Dominic's asking, what's the difference between agentic AI change management and regular change management? Like, what do I need to be thinking about? Chaz, maybe you can take that question.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's interesting. There's a couple of things. One, when you do change management, you often, with AI, a lot of our change management in traditional classical transformation is about changing the people most impacted by the shift and getting them to accept using shared services and working with an offshore or a centralized team. And it's about the provider. With agentic AI, those providers, in a lot of cases, the bulk of that work is going to be AI agents. You're not doing change management for the provider, but change management is still critical. You need to engage with the rest of the organization and the client. You can't just put up a chat engine and expect that the clients will accept it. And so the change management shifts, and there's a lot of training. There's a lot of other differences. If you think about your talent system, when you do classical transformation, if you're doing shared services for HR, it might be 3 to 4 job descriptions. Now you actually need to think about shifting your whole talent system, because it's not what you do, it's why your role exists and is oversight. And so rather than just changing a few of the roles, you're changing your full talent system. So the bigger shift if you're doing that transformation. The speed is different. You're moving quicker. The business case is going to be different. You get that true scalability. Your agentic outcomes are more impactful. A lot of those outcomes we used to talk about, maybe lip service in the past, because really it was a labor arbitrage business case. You can really achieve other outcomes and business case improvement. So there's a lot of individual differences, especially in change management. I've heard people say, oh, you don't need to worry about change management because the people are gone. You absolutely do. You need to shift your focus for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always right, this change management discussion, right? I mean, this term is used so often and understood so poorly, at least from my experience. So I think with regard to this agentic transformation that is now happening in the next decade, this is going to touch every aspect, right? Not a specific role, not a specific team. It's a new way of working that the entire organization needs to learn. And there is so much to do, right? To teach, to reorganize. It's really profound change management that you need to do as an organization in all aspects.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got time for one more question. I'll direct this one to you first, Uli. Just see if give me a sec. Yeah, Carlos is asking, from your perspective and experience, what are the main processes within HR in GBS where more comprehensive AI-driven processes are being
Carlos, listen, I think HR it's generally an interesting function, right? I mean, for someone that is very process driven and focuses on those big transactional things, right, like invoices and what have you, right, cash app. HR works always a little bit differently, right? It's a different culture, it's a different type of working. But what it essentially is you deal with a lot of documents and communication, obviously, right? And I think this is exactly where you can use AI and AI agents in every little aspect of what you're doing there, right? It's not maybe the human factor of having a conversation with something else, right? I really mean the operations in HR. So starting with applicants, it is so simple to have a AI agent help you to go through all those resumes that you're getting and matching them to your job profiles and helping you to organize and sort and see what fits, which is right a real complication, right? Someone needs to go through and then sorting it out, and often you don't get to see everything, and then you lose opportunity. That sort of everyday realities, right? Very simple. But then also those everyday little things, right? Like sick notices that you need to deal with, right? You need to update birth certificates, or also great use case that we are just doing with a big hospital chain. So they have like, what have you, 500,000 of big files, still physical files that they have in their basement right? Employee files. And they have now this shiny new HR management system, and that needs to be all sorted and all data needs to be inputted. It's an impossible task, right? And you can automate those type of things so easily using agents, instructing them how to do it, going through all those documents, organizing them, getting the information out, inputting this into your systems. It's a bliss. It's simple, right? So it's really in so many aspects you can do this, right? Travel expenses and travel expense policy compliance and all those topics, right? Endless opportunity.
Yeah, just to add to that, the work that you would traditionally move to an HR shared service center, that's prime candidate.
Yeah.
But beyond that, when you talk to a recruiter that even has effective shared services, a lot of their day is spent chasing, whether it's looking for feedback from the hiring managers, it's trying to find out what the status of pipelines are, getting all the information. All that chasing, all that transactional work that still stays with the recruiter, because it would actually make the process less efficient if you try to move it to shared services, breaks the workflow too much. That's where Agentic AI is really going to shine. It's really going to really improve the capacity. So the recruiter is actually recruiting, not doing that paperwork. So I would say the talent acquisition and the workforce administration are the prime areas for AI and HR.
Sure.
Yeah. And in just one line, Uli, and before I close out, Ian's asking, what quality of chat language is needed to teach the AI agent, and is it always in English language?
No, it doesn't have to be in English language at all. That just doesn't matter. There is also lots of help you get. So if you build those work instructions, right, you would be using an AI assistant that helps you to write a better work instruction based on what you want to do. But still, what's your job, and you will get that feedback when you work with the assistant, is how to be clear, right? Clarity. It all needs to make sense, must not be inconsistent. So you can get a lot of help by an AI to write actually those prompts, interestingly enough. So that's a very important aspect. The conversations. Also, I don't know if you've seen, it was too quick and a deep cut, I know, but right, if the AI is correctly instructed for that conversation, they're going to help you, and they're going to ask clarifying questions. Can you please explain this a bit better so that I can actually put this into my knowledge base and I can really understand what you mean by that? So there's a lot of help doing this. Can be in every language, that doesn't matter. And you don't need to be a prompt engineer by training, if that is actually a job that you can learn anyways. So you can use AI to help you.
Makes sense, yeah. Fantastic. Well, I could talk to you all day, but sadly, that's all we've got time for. We've reached the top of our webinar. I want to thank Chaz and Uli so much for taking the time to speak today and share your expertise. We've recorded the session now, so it will be available on demand. I'll send an email out with that. I know a couple of you have asked for the slides. We'll also share those slides, no problem at all. And if you are interested to learn more about Agentic GBS or any of the topics that we've been talking about today, don't hesitate to get in touch. There's a QR code there. You can add us on LinkedIn. And yeah, we will see you at the next one. Thank you again.